Allison Rosen. Allison Rosen is your new best friend. Allison, with her good times never end. Allison Rosen, doing the wavy pencil dance again. Allison Rosen, Allison's your new best friend.
Hey everyone. Hi. Hello. Welcome to a very exciting episode of Allison Rosen is your new best friend. I am sitting here in my studio with host, comedian, writer, person who was on my show very early on, and now it's been way too long, Paul Gilmartin. Hello.
Hello. Exciting. Isn't that a little much to call this exciting?
I'm excited.
The episode with me. Okay.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too, but I'm it's
Reserved.
all being filtered through a tiny bit of self-loathing. So.
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know you haven't changed.
And it's so good to see you again. It was
good to see
ages ago, and you were a great guest on my podcast.
Thank you. The Mental Illness Happy Hour, which when I first discovered podcasts, which was, at this point a long time ago, but maybe later than some people, I remember when I was like in the process of auditioning for the Adam Carolla show, and I was listening to a lot of podcasts. Yours was what I listened to. I remember listening to you and Janet Varney, and then I met you guys. So, Paul, I was trying to remember, you were on a live show that I did at Nerd Melt, or Meltdown Comics.
Yes.
And before that, excuse me, you were on an episode of my show when it was like being tested. Like, I don't even know if it was officially called Allison Rosen is your new best friend. And then I was trying to remember if there was a time that you came. Do you remember like coming and being a guest on Allison Rosen is your new best friend in studio?
So. I think so.
Okay.
Were you recording those at Adams?
I was.
I think I did one there.
Okay. But I think that might have been, a quick Google search would have solved this. That's too easy. I think that might have been when it was like being tested out though. Maybe not. Maybe we did too. But anyway, it's been forever.
10 years, probably.
Longer, because that would have been 2011.
That's the year I started doing my podcast.
Yeah, 11 years.
And I think you were in the first year of my podcast.
Oh,
you
my
were
God.
one of the first guests.
Oh, wow.
Your episode might not even be available. I think that because I have the first 90 episodes behind
a paywall?
Actually, not even behind a paywall. I hold them back so that I can release a best of when I take a week off.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
That's really smart. Yeah. I just do an encore episode from a long time ago, but it's like not even...
I mean, if you've been doing it for 10 years and you do them from the first 3 years, chances are 90% of the people listening have not heard it or don't mind hearing it again because it's been so long.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what I remember from one of our very early interviews is so this shows how early it was. I had surgery scheduled. And I know I had surgery at the end of 2011 for endometriosis. And I was really afraid of general anesthesia because I'd never had it. And you had it like 17 times.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating.
No, it's pretty close. I've had 14 surgeries.
Oh my God. And I just remember being like, holy shit. And then I ended up doing IVF to have my kids who you met. So I have now had it a number of times and realized like, oh, I really enjoy this. I really like the Versed they give you. It makes you so calm beforehand. It's the first time.
That is the best part.
I've never felt so free of any kind of anxiety.
Oh, yeah. I often say it's almost worth the surgery and the physical therapy to experience that moment when they give you Valium and a nice nurse is putting a warm blanket on you and asking you in a soothing voice if she can get you anything. I want to live there.
I know.
I want to live there.
Yes.
And especially,
it is really the best.
And especially as a sober person, that you get what we call a freebie, when they give you Valium. And so I always exaggerate a little bit. I'm a little nervous about this. Can you give me something to relax me?
I've definitely done the what number, afterwards. Mm-hmm. What number is your pain? Oh, 6. No, it's like a 3.
Yeah.
You got it. The IV drugs are right there. You have an IV in.
Right.
People are there to take care of you. Take advantage. Wait, now, why 14?
Probably half of them are hockey related things. And then I had issues when I was a kid. When I was 2 weeks old, the muscle at the between your stomach and your small intestine was too small. And so I was projectile vomiting. So essentially I was starving the first 2 weeks of my life. And then my testicles didn't descend when I was like, I don't know, whenever they're supposed to descend when you're a boy. I think between like 7 and 10. Mine didn't. So I had to have these surgeries where to pull the testicle down, they essentially attached a bungee cord to your testicle.
Oh my God.
And strapped it to your leg in a straight cast. So it's just pulling. It's pulling it. And you're in bed for like, I don't know, 7 days.
Was that as excruciating as it sounds?
It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. And then I've had 3 hernias. I got a plate in my left ankle. I've had 3 shoulder surgeries, a lot of wear and tear from playing hockey.
Right.
But ever since I was a little kid, I've always just kind of surrendered to the process. So I don't get nervous when I go to get surgery. In fact, there's a part of me that likes that I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. I think that's where it's been a long time since I've had anything, but that's kind of where I've arrived is like, I think I feel a little bit of nervousness leading up to it. But then once you're like in the bed, it's like, you really, it's the least responsible you have to be for anything.
And people are caring for you.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And you can lie to yourself and say, they love me.
It does feel like they do. Something about that drug and then someone like fussing around you. It's really womb-like.
I have a super big soft spot in my heart for nurses that treat people like human beings, which sounds ridiculous to say it out loud.
It doesn't sound ridiculous because I've had nurses who don't, and it's awful.
It's awful because you're in one of the most vulnerable moments of your life. You don't know if you're going to be okay. Your brain may be telling you this is going to be a catastrophe or whatever. And I had a nurse when I had that testicle surgery, and I was so ashamed because, little kids adults too, they're so worried that their bodies are different. They're weird, whatever. And she made me feel like the most special person in the world. She would make up these songs, with my name in them, and she'd sing them to me.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And ever since that day, I have just always, just felt like this bond with nurses when they're nice and they're caring. And I have to say 95% of the ones I've had have been that way.
That's
and
great.
It's really,
Can we go back to this testicle surgery though for a moment, just because I'm trying to understand. So where is the bungee cord attached?
To the bottom of the testicle. And I don't
on the inside of the scrotum though. Inside your body.
I guess it must have been because it wasn't pulling on the skin. So it had to have been sewn into the testicle, I guess. I couldn't really see from my angle, but it was a bungee cord, and I have to imagine that they do it differently today because this was in 1874.
Right.
And they had horses pulling. That was what was giving attention.
Did they put like a piece of parchment in your mouth to bite down on for the pain?
Exactly. And then a guy with little wire spectacles said, storms are brewing.
Well, I had an impacted cuspid, which means one of my, canine teeth was like up in the roof of my mouth.
That had to hurt. No?
It didn't hurt. Well, no, it just means it hadn't descended.
Gotcha.
So they do a surgery where they go in and they attach a bracket to it, and then you have a little like chain that hangs down from the roof of your mouth and attaches. Then you get braces and attaches to that, and they pull on it. Like they pull it down, but every month when you get your braces tightened, they like pull this elastic thing, and that's uncomfortable. So essentially, I had a very similar situation.
Was yours shaped like a testicle? Because mine was shaped like a tooth. My testicle looked like a molar.
Yes, it was. It was shaped like full male anatomy, just hanging out up there. It was so weird when it came through. Okay, so fill me in on what's been going on since 2011.
Oh my God. Well, I got
the highlights.
I got divorced I'm still sober. Got sober in 2003, still sober, 20 years sober.
Congrats.
I started going to I would have been going to that support group Yes, I'd been going to this. I started going to a support group for kind of intimacy and trust issues. In 2009, but that's been the one that has been kind of uncovering the deepest issues. And so that would probably be the thing that has progressed the most in terms of like growing and learning things about myself and just dropping old coping mechanisms that weren't working and discovering new ones and being comfortable with intimacy. And sadly, I did get divorced in 2016. I mean, we've both grown apart. We're friendly today, but then I had to start dating again. In 2018, I started dating again, and it was so weird.
Yeah.
It was so weird because the last time I'd gone on a date was in 1987.
Oh my God. You had been with your wife since 87?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was really weird. But that's also when I discovered that all the work I'd done in that support group was paying off, because I would go on these dates, and even if I was kind of physically attracted to a woman, if there were red flags, like if I got a codependent vibe from her or something, I would just, no second date. And there were a couple of times where like I knew if I had wanted to have sex, I could have. And what was new for me was I would fast forward, I'd think, oh yeah, physically that might be enjoyable. But then I would picture laying in bed with him afterwards. And that was the part that made me go, I don't really feel attracted to her personality. And that was mind blowing for me because I was a pig for years. And it's something I carried a tremendous amount of shame with, and I still do, because I used women, I objectified them. In my brain back, and this was 20, 30 years ago, if you weren't physically restraining a woman, it wasn't a violation, which sounds ridiculous now.
I mean, it's really, yes, it does. But all of that has changed so much.
It has.
So by that, do you mean that you were pressuring them?
Yes. Pressuring them. Being manipulative.
Pouting, or like, what was your go-to manipulation?
Try to rationalize. It's everybody does it. Don't be hung up on your, religion or and it never occurred to me that they weren't just blatantly saying no because they wanted to be the nice girl. Right. They didn't want to hurt my feelings. And it wasn't until I had Gina Grad on the episode and she shared about how many times she just gave up because she was being worn down, and I felt my stomach drop. And I went, oh my God, I've been that guy that you've experienced. And that was kind of the beginning. But I'd been in my support group for intimacy for 3 years at that point. So I'm a very fucking slow learner. And I try to talk about, part of my podcast is talking about really negative experiences, traumatic experiences that people have. And I've had them where I've been on the receiving end of sexual violations. And I always feel that it's only fair of me to share my history where I've been the person who pushed the boundaries or, was not a good dude.
Right. I have to say, I think of you as such an enlightened, nice guy that it's surprising to me to find out that you are a self-described pig. Do you get that a lot? People being surprised to hear this?
I do. And I take that as a compliment because I do think I've changed. But, there's something hardwired in me. I think when you, and maybe this is just me making an excuse, but a lot of people in my support group are this way as well. When you're raised in a sexually charged environment, if you've experienced sexual violations, no matter how overt or covert, that can become your drug, the thing that you use to soothe yourself, because you tend to feel like you are an object. And so since I was 7, I just remember, like, pardon the bluntness, being obsessed with pussies, just like wanting to see girls naked. I think
since 7. Wow.
Since 7. I remember watching like a play was being rehearsed with classmates of mine. And I just remember thinking, I wonder what all those girls look like with their skirts off. And, you know, kids will do the typical show, you know, show me yours, I'll show you mine. But it seemed way more important to me. And so I always felt like a pervert. And I didn't know why. And all of this is to say there is still something wired in me that when things get really bad and I'm not utilizing the tools I need to, opening up to friends, making, you know, outreach phone calls, being of service, praying, meditating, all that other stuff, I want to go to porn or something where I can view women as objects and get high and numb myself from it. And I'm ashamed that occasionally I will slip and I will go to that place. So I think it's important to share that, you know, I feel like I'm 95% changed, but there's still a little vestige. It's like there's an ember that never, for me, that never goes out, and I have to make sure to not give it oxygen.
I've certainly felt in my dating years, well, maybe I didn't feel it that much in my dating years. It was after looking back. I don't think I used sex per se as a drug, but I certainly used relationships and attention as a drug. And and I needed them to be sexually attracted to me for the validation. And I remember a moment I was drunk and I was sitting outside the apartment I lived in New York on the phone talking to this guy I was dating. He lived in Brooklyn, and I was trying to convince him to come over and spend the night at my place. And I was really pressuring him. And he had work the next morning, like early. And I was like, but you can go from my house, you know, or my apartment. And I remember him saying, why are you trying to convince me to do something that's not good for me? And I feel bad about that. And I feel bad about all the, like, the coercion that I was doing. No, it wasn't like sexual coercion. I mean, it wasn't
in the bedroom
predatory, right? But it was not being respectful of people's boundaries because I was so selfish, or I was just thinking about getting my needs met in the moment. And I was like a toddler in a crib, like, pick me up, take care. I mean, I was coming from such a young place, but I'm kind of horrified at all those years and all that behavior. And in fact, I don't know, you probably can't say which group you're talking about, but it might be one that I have thought I should at some point drop in, check out those steps.
We'll talk afterwards.
Yeah.
And I don't say that that I won't say it because I'm ashamed. It's because I don't want to appear as a spokesperson for the group.
Attraction, not promotion. Yeah. I think it's probably okay. So how then? I mean, I guess you kind of answered this by like the meditation, the prayer, all the things you do to sort of keep yourself sober, for lack of a better word, or maybe that is the word. How then, while you're dating and getting to know people, how do you deal with that ember?
Well, for one, I don't look to them to fill something in me that I need to fill myself. So that would be a sense of self, which has taken me years to build, and it will, I'm sure, be a lifelong process. But it's out of the DEFCON 10 area to something that's where the siren isn't flashing. In my relationship with my girlfriend.
You have a girlfriend?
I do.
How long is that?
5 years.
Oh.
And if we broke up, I would be heartbroken, but I know I would be okay.
Yes.
I would be okay by myself. And I think it was really important that I lived alone for a while after I got divorced, but it was painful and terrifying. And the place that I went to was
porn,
seeking everything online. Well, when you're married and you're not doing that stuff, you kind of think, well, what's that like to be single and, do that cam thing and this thing over there and hook up online with somebody. And it was all kind of, online stuff. But there were some times when I was doing it and like, I wasn't really eating. I was, I was doing it compulsively.
I see.
And I think I was lucky in that I was able to run the wheels off it and to realize I feel terrible inside. I feel empty and I feel like a pathetic little boy. I really related when you talked about feeling like an infant.
Yeah.
And so I think the next phase, once I stopped doing that, I think I was able to get kind of my feet under me and have a clear enough head that when I did start dating, I wasn't a total mess. I think I was a little bit of a mess.
I think everyone probably coming out of divorce feels that way.
But, here's the positive things. It used to be like when I would have a one-night stand, it felt so good to leave the next day because I didn't have to worry about her needs, things about her that were annoying. I didn't want any responsibility. It wasn't until I began to learn how to set boundaries that I realized, I had felt cornered my whole life because I was always giving somebody what they wanted or running. And there's a middle ground where I can say, well, let's talk about this, or I'm not comfortable with that, or that doesn't feel okay to me. And when I began having those conversations, suddenly I'm like, I love being monogamous. I don't feel cornered. And I don't want to get out of bed as soon as we're done having sex. I want to sit there and I love that part afterwards. And it feels cheesy to say that because 15 years ago, if I heard a dude say that, I'd be like, oh, you're just trying to sound good on the podcast. What you're virtue signaling. No, I really do. And that I'm very proud and happy about that because I've put the work in to get to that place. And it feels good. I never imagined I would be somebody that not tolerated monogamy, but really enjoyed it.
So these conversations that you're talking about, realizing you could have, like, what does that look like? Or like, what's an example of a kind of conversation like that? Because I'm relating I remember at one point feeling like it's inevitable that whatever someone asks me to do, not in a sexual setting, but just in like anything, like I have to give it to them if they ask. And it's like, that's a powerless feeling. And it's not true.
And who wants to walk out their front door when you view the world that way?
Yes.
Because that was the pattern with my mom. I became her therapist at 7, where she'd break down and cry about her marriage and how she wanted to leave us because we were all selfish.
Oh, geez.
And I remember feeling like it's up to me to keep her happy.
Oh my God.
So I and there was lots of creepy shit besides that, but
Are you the eldest?
No, my brother's older than me. So I think I believed, and my mother never said to me, you're the one that's going to keep me happy. I anointed myself that. And I think, and there's a certain power in that, it can be intoxicating. Yeah, I'm smart. I'm as smart as an adult. But until you retire that role in your play, you're going to keep doing it until it doesn't work. And it stopped working for me when I began to piece together, I sexually act out or I play my video game compulsively when I'm feeling cornered in my life. So in what ways can I free myself up from being cornered? Well, by saying, and this has happened very rarely, but happened a couple times in my relationship with my girlfriend where I said, that hurt my feelings, the way you talked to me. I felt disrespected. I felt like you were telling me that I'm stupid. And I expressed them in terms of my feelings rather than saying, why are you being such a cunt or whatever? And the great thing about when you do something like that, you express your feelings, is you give that other person an opportunity to reveal their character. And she revealed her character by taking responsibility for it, apologizing and adjusting her behavior. And I'd like to think that I've done the same as well when she has said, you know, you're not really present when we're hanging out. You know, you're distracted. And I'm just, you know, I might as well just go home right now. And I have said, I'm so sorry. I'm going to try to do better. And I'd like to think that I do. And it's a very free feeling being in a relationship that's clean.
Yeah.
Where there's nothing swept under the rug. And, you know, I was saying to somebody the other day in my support group, if somebody asks you, how's your relationship? Think about how comfortable would you be if your partner was alone with your phone? I would be totally fine if my girlfriend was alone with my phone. And that feels good. You know, one of the things that I use to guide my behavior, and I don't even have to think about it, but previously in my life, I would have failed this test, is don't act in a way around a person of the gender you're attracted to in a way that you wouldn't if your partner was standing right there. And that to me answers, am I emotionally cheating, or, you know, am I being faithful or not? Because I used to be like, well, we're not full on fucking. So I saved that for, because I was a terrible husband. I was a really shitty husband.
And how many years were you married?
Well, we were together since 87. We're living together since 88. We got divorced in 2016, and we're married in 95. Okay. So
a good number
but
of
together,
years.
You know, almost 29 years, something like that.
Yeah.
A long time.
What kind of bad husband were you?
Cheated. Could be emotionally cold. Could be dishonest. Critical.
What the fuck, Paul? You're not
Critical.
like that. I'm just kidding. Yeah. And did you fess up about cheating?
I did.
How'd that go?
Not well. Yeah, it really, really hurt her, as I would imagine it would anybody who is invested and trusted somebody. And, you know, I will feel bad about that until the day I die. But, you know, one of my female friends in my support group said to me, the only thing you have control over is whether or not you change and whether or not you are still that guy. And I have female friends in my support group who tell me they feel safe with me. And that means a lot. That means a lot to me. So I feel like I'm heading in the right direction.
Did this go on the whole time?
On and off. When the first 6 years of my sobriety from drugs and alcohol, it was not an issue. And then the desire to cheat started creeping back in, and it scared the fuck out of me. So I started going to the support group that I mentioned about intimacy and stuff like that. But within that, I began, as I withdrew from the high of pornography and other non-cheating, because I think I know she knew that I would look at pornography occasionally. As I withdrew from that, all the feelings I'd buried as a kid, and this is textbook for that, you know, program. This is what happens. All the feelings, and they may not necessarily be new memories, but because you're not overstimulated by acting out, you feel them differently. And I suddenly felt all the truths that I had buried as a kid, and it was the most painful thing that I've ever experienced. And I broke down and I just started sobbing, and my wife said, I've been waiting 20 years for you to do this. She could see this in me very early on. That was the beginning. And then
when you say all the truths, are you talking about realizations about your family?
About my mom and just the way she touched me, looked at me, et cetera, et cetera. And I could go into all kinds of gory details, but I think you probably get the picture. And there were many great things about my mom. You know, she stood up when people would say racist things in our neighborhood, she would stand up and say, that's wrong. So she is a very complicated woman. But that was, as I began to process that and all that pain came up, I resorted to the old mechanisms. And, I wasn't going out and having one night stands because I wasn't going on the road, but, I would go to get a massage hoping that it was, the one with the happy ending. And I would kid myself and say, well, I didn't know it was that.
Right.
And honestly, there was more of a high of going into a place where I didn't know if it was going to happen or not. Going to one where it's going to happen I think for an addict, it takes, because part of the high is the searching for whatever it is. And I think people that watch porn know what that is. You're looking for the perfect clip for, 2.5 hours or 8 hours or whatever it is with that person. It's the high of the anticipation.
Right.
The moment itself is usually almost a letdown. It's the fantasy.
What percentage of massages happen to include that? It's making me realize I'm naive about massages.
Well, in Los Angeles, my guess would be probably half are legitimate, half are not.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's that frequent.
But
I thought this was almost like an urban legend.
Well, if you go to Ventura Boulevard, it's probably going to be 75% legitimate. The further north you go into poorer neighborhoods, it's going to be probably 75% the other way.
And do they I'm sorry, I know this is not, I don't want to be prurient, but do they try to assess whether that's what you're there for?
I don't know if I know what's going on in their mind, but you usually know within the first minute, because generally the more sexual it is, the worse the massage is.
I see. Interesting.
And so if they start off and it's like, wow, this person has never been to massage school, you know that it's one of those places.
Right. And would you say, I know you don't work there, but most people going there, is that why they're going there? This is eye-opening to me.
Yes. And I don't mind answering all of
great.
all of these questions. There's nothing, I'm an open book. I think the majority of people, you may stumble into one once where you're surprised by that, but the vibe you get when you're in there, you'll recognize that in the next place that you go to that has that vibe. And
it's and what is the vibe?
The way the massage therapists dress. Are
they dressed in a scantily clad way? Well,
if it's a legitimate place, they'll be dressed in a way almost like you would if you were at physical therapy.
Right.
If it's not, if you go in and they're wearing a short skirt, it's not a legitimate place. A lot of the non-legitimate places, English isn't their first language. And that brings up a whole nother layer of shame that I feel, as I look back, I'm like, some of these women might have been trafficked.
Right. So you said that when you started dating, you might be attracted to the woman, but if you, if you saw red flags, like if she seemed codependent on the first date or whatever, there wasn't a second date. And I just imagine listeners who might be single listening, being like, what is it that indicates that someone is codependent? What kind of codependent vibe might you have been getting on those first dates?
Well, the worst one that I got, that I almost just ran out of the coffee date. And these were all dates during the day, which was another thing that was important to me, is to just eliminate any kind of that thing and to go slowly. This woman she was divorced, and she said, well, I don't necessarily need a man because I've got my son. He's my little man. And I just remember oh my God, that is just like my mom. And it just turned my stomach, and I felt so bad for that kid.
Yeah.
And I was angry at her inside, but also kind of felt sorry for her because it's like she I don't think she knows how much she's fucking
Right.
her son up.
Yeah.
You know, and that is, your child is not there to meet your emotional needs. You know,
Yeah.
there are things that you can feel fulfilled by
Mm-hmm.
being a parent. And this is just me guessing because I'm not a parent, but I know for sure looking to your child
To
for
fulfill-
validation and asking them, come give mommy a hug, mommy's sad. Not cool.
No.
Not cool.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where that's like the reddest of flags for you.
Yes, for me.
Yeah.
For me. And somebody else may be okay with that. So I'm
Right.
just going to speak
They're not gonna
about
hear
what
it the
works
same
for
way,
me. And there was
yeah.
another woman who I was really physically attracted to, but as she was describing the relationships she'd been into, one was with like an abusive alcoholic that she still, I don't know, she clung on to it for years and did not really seem, from what I gathered from my conversation with her, that she had gained any insight about her part in contributing to that dynamic by enabling him.
Right.
And she certainly didn't cause his drinking, but she didn't give him any consequences. And I would like a partner that doesn't take shit from somebody, that isn't a doormat. Not that I'm looking to step on them,
Right.
but what I find is when someone is a doormat in certain areas of their life, they take it out on the people they love, or they dump on the people they love. And my girlfriend started doing that because she was being manipulated by an untreated alcoholic that worked for her. And she just kept giving him chance after chance after chance. And then she would bitch to me on the phone about him. And I eventually said, I can't do these conversations anymore. You have the power. You hold the key to getting out of this prison. You are not locked in it. And you're free to choose whatever you want, but I can no longer enable you by listening to you play victim
Right.
in this.
So you felt that because she was like taking all the negative feelings she had about that and then had a place to put them, that was prolonging her coming to the realization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And dumping.
Right.
When
On
we would
you,
talk on the
yeah.
phone, she would bitch for 20 minutes straight about this.
Yeah.
And she's not that person anymore. And sometimes, you know, maybe she has an employee that she's enabling. I'll say, baby, can I give you some truth here? And I try to do it in a loving way. And she's open to
That's
that.
great.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
great.
And it feels good because then I don't have resentment.
Yeah.
You know, resentment is the fucking intimacy killer. It is the intimacy killer.
I know.
And I can't imagine how much having kids complicates things because
I mean, this is my first relationship where, and Daniel and I have now been together for 12 years, married for 9. This is the first relationship I've been in where where we have healthy communication, where we can talk about something to the point where like, I really feel like I've unburdened my soul, you know, I'm not, I'll finish that thought and then I'll go back to what I was going to say. Like, yeah, it's the first one where I can really just put it all out there. He puts it all out there and we are closer afterwards and feel good. I had never experienced that. I grew up in a house where if you tried to tell someone how you felt in relation to them, then you would get in trouble. You were bad. That was a character attack. You should have known not to say that.
it was weaponized. Feelings were weaponized.
Totally. It was very confusing, and it just taught me that communication is futile. And then in any relationship I had prior to Daniel, I was so afraid to be too much, to be wrong, to be unreasonable, to not be considering where it was so loaded that when I would try to talk about anything, it was like I was holding a balloon full of feelings and I was just like, beep, let out like 10% of them.
Such a great metaphor.
And so I never had the feeling of like emptying the balloon, you know, because I never did. It was always like it was a rehearsed statement. and God forbid I never felt better afterwards. I was like, I guess I just take this bucket of shit and go deal with it on my own. So yeah, there's definitely resentments that creep in with kids because it becomes a lot of just scheduling and whose turn is it and all that. But it's good. We communicate well, I think. So.
And your kids are fucking adorable. By the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you were talking about the urge to cheat had kind of gone away and then it came back. Mm-hmm. As relating to sort of where you were in internally, like what triggers or triggered the urge to cheat?
Pain. Yeah.
So wanting an escape?
Yeah. Wanting to escape. And to survive, I had created an idealized version of my mom that didn't exist in reality. Mm-hmm. And when I stopped acting out and began to feel my feelings, began to pay attention to my body and go, oh, my skin crawls when I hug her. I feel, leaving her apartment, it feels like shooting heroin. I feel such relief. And I started to say, what if there's something underneath that and I'm not just a bad, selfish son? And as I began to give weight to that, all these pieces began to fit into place and kind of, if it were a puzzle, the puzzle said, you are an object. Mm. And when the truth of that hit me, I felt like an astronaut whose line had been cut out in space. I didn't know, like when you were talking about, you didn't know as you were trying to let the feelings out. Am I being selfish?
Right.
Am I right to say I didn't know where any truth was? Mm. And I as corny as it sounds, I wanted a mommy.
No, that doesn't sound corny.
And there was this also, because either I'm wired that way or my brain works that way, that I also want to sexualize it. So it's like, this is probably way too much information.
No.
But I suddenly began to have fantasies of like a mom figure taking care of me, getting me off, and then holding me while I cry afterwards.
I'm sorry to laugh.
Yeah.
I love how honest that is. And I actually don't think it's that rare. I probably don't. I don't think it is. And that went away after I processed this stuff. And I had incensed fantasies about my mom. There would be times that I'd almost be laughing like, I can't believe I'm about to jerk off thinking about tricking my mom into giving me a hand job. And I'd be like, that's where I'm at. Mm. You're okay, buddy. That's radical self-acceptance.
It was. Yeah. It was. And that I learned was also part of being comfortable with intimacy. It's really hard to be intimate with someone when you fucking hate and judge every part of yourself.
Yeah.
And I had an epiphany in my support groups once where I realized it's important to have compassion for others, but not at the expense of compassion for yourself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If we talked to somebody else the way we talk to ourselves, they would get a restraining order on us. But for some reason, we tell ourselves, I'm disciplining myself. No, you're not. Nobody's ever shamed themselves into being the person they want to be.
Yes.
So those epiphanies helped me go, dude, you're not dirty. You're a wounded person who is trying to heal. And that's how I look at it today. And that's one of the reasons I actually enjoy saying these things that I would have been horrified to say earlier, because I think it can probably help someone who's listening.
For sure. Yeah.
And I like talking about myself.
We all do.
Yes.
Speaking of mental illness happy hour, you've been doing it now for 10 years.
12.
Sorry.
Yep.
So I demoted you.
God damn
what
you.
The fuck?
God, I'm not a 2013 person.
No, that's
class
right.
of 2011.
2011. Before the show started, I said, how's it going? And I said, I'm going to ask you on air as well. But tell me more about how it's going. Because I know, as someone who's been doing my show for a long time, it's like a lifeline. But at the same time, there's certain challenges that you hit, in your 12th year, let's say, or whatever. Yeah. So how's it all going? I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions in a row, and then I'm going to let you speak. What a weird way to interview someone. I guess I'm also wondering, have you noticed that the kinds of issues people are presenting with have changed over the years?
Yes. I just started going. We just did episode 666.
Ooh, fun.
And so for it, I thought, half the show is an interview. The other half is me reading anonymous surveys that have been filled out online by listeners, and they share some really dark shit. And a lot of times I will go, that one's too dark to read. And so I thought for 666, I'm going to read all those episodes.
Oh, that's so smart.
There's going to be nothing positive in it. This is going to be a bar of dark chocolate. No theme music, nothing. And I'm just going to plow through these darkest of dark surveys. And so I did that. But, doing the podcast for the 12 years, I have read and heard a lot of really, really dark shit. And I think sometimes that can weigh on me. It's one of the reasons why I typically, if I'm having an author on, I don't read their book because I only have so much bandwidth. Even if their book isn't dark, it's still in the mental illness realm. I may spot read or something, but and I feel kind of bad and lazy about that. But one of the things I learned in my support group, listen to your battery.
Yeah.
If your battery's getting drained, respect it.
Like if you read their book, you feel like you're just holding too much dark shit.
Yeah. And even if their book isn't dark shit, it's just more about the subject of mental illness, addiction, trauma, whatever. Sitting across the table from them is completely different because there's a human being there and it's a conversation.
Right.
And that actually energizes me. So I don't know why those two things are different, but
I have found a really weird thing that happens, which is at the beginning, not even at the beginning, up until like a year ago, I'd say, I always read the book. I felt it was my duty, so that when they show up, look how much research I've done. I'm a good girl. I'm a good interviewer. I'm a good podcaster.
I love that you said that.
Yeah. But it began to get in the way of my curiosity because I'd sit there and any question I thought to ask, I already know the answer because I just read your book and I probably finished it this morning. Like if I put some time between reading their book and them coming on, that helped. And then because I can't be inauthentic, or I can't, it feels dishonest to ask a question when I already know the answer. I'd be doing this shit like, I know in your book you talk about that, but talk about it for the listeners. And it just like, all of a sudden,
and you felt like a know-it-all.
Yeah, it became clumsy.
Yes, that's a great word for it.
I remember I had Dave Holmes on a number of years ago, and he sent me an excerpt, and I was like, "Oh, this is like the perfect amount of their book."
Perfect amount.
Yeah. But I do find that if I don't know the answer to all this stuff, it's actually easier for me. So I've been released.
I'm glad to hear you say that because
I've been released from the duty to read the book. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. And now I don't feel like a lazy piece of shit.
No, you're actually being a journalist.
4 or 5 minutes. By the time I get to my car, I will again be a lazy piece of shit.
Okay, so but you said that you have noticed that no. Tell me about the dark stuff. Like what kind of dark stuff was it?
The very first one I remember reading, there's one survey called Awfulsome Moment. It's a term we dubbed for something that was awful when it happened, but there's also something awesome in it. And not like it was positive, but like so fucked up you laugh about it, or something genuinely beautiful came out of it, and they fill out whether or not it's awfulsome. I don't categorize it for those. So it's not me going, oh my God, this is hilarious. But if they decide to say, in hindsight, this is hilarious, this woman shared, I think this was like the 5th awfulsome moment I've read, and I would say there's probably been 4,000 of them filled out now.
Right.
But this was one of the first ones I read. She said, the man who molested me when I was a child had hooks for hands. Had hooks for hands.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
So, and on episode 666, there was probably, I did them from light to dark, from beginning to, that one was probably towards the front or the middle.
Oh, so that it got just way worse.
Way worse. Yeah. The last couple of ones are like, oh my God, human beings are terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it felt good to kind of go, just so you know, this is what this job involves. You know, It's one of the reasons I love therapists, because I only have to do this one day a week. They've got to do it 5 fucking days a week.
Yeah.
And I'm not comparing myself to a therapist. I just mean taking in somebody sharing their trauma. I'm a cheerleader for the therapists and the professionals.
Yeah. I think about that often. I think because my alternate direction, I sometimes think, should I have gone that way? Was, should I have become a therapist? And then I think, but I know, and I am sure they're trained in this, but I know it would be hard for me to be like, well, we have to end for today. But, that whole thing, and like to not, actually my therapist will sometimes say like, I thought about you over the weekend, and I'm like, yes, it's such a good feeling.
It's a good feeling. Right. Yeah. It's a really good feeling. Yeah.
You want to be their favorite with the most insight. I was doing the work.
I didn't let them down.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I think it'd be really hard to have boundaries with a therapist, but so necessary.
Leaving a therapist was one of the healthiest, most proud things I've ever done. Yeah, I would have liked to have done it in person. I did it over a voicemail, but
hey, you could have done it on text or something.
I could have done it on text, but I was very proud of myself because it just wasn't working for me. She would forget what we had talked about. She allowed her dogs in the session without even asking me, and they would, I'd be in the middle of revealing something really fucking intense and heavy, and the dog would, be nuzzling me. Right. And I was just like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
She's not terrible, but it's just not for me. And so I felt really good. And any therapist that tries to fight you leaving them is a terrible therapist.
Right. Did she fight you?
No.
Okay, good.
No.
I have also, I had to end it with a therapist who I'd only gone to a handful of times, and it felt like an ill fit from the whole time, but I was really afraid of what her reaction was going to be. And that's my own shit. But, well, it was also her. I mean, obviously I didn't trust her, but she was actually very cool. And she was like, I understand. And if you ever want to talk about it, let me know. And I was like, thankful.
Have you ever developed feelings for a therapist?
No, because I have only had female therapists, except for there's a psychiatrist that I see. I mean, however often you see someone for med management. So at this point, like and
that's not intimate.
Right. And he's not my type, but I don't know now, but I mean, my pattern was always to be like, I had a crush on my driving teacher, Andy. We drove around, just him and me. We made jokes. We had repartee. I had it so bad for Andy, the driving teacher, that then when I graduated the driving school, I didn't get in a car accident because of him, but I did get in a car accident. It was minor, but still not what you want shortly after you turn 16.
Because you were dreaming about Andy?
Yeah. Well, no. So then I wrote a letter about it, and I gave it to my friend who was, going to that school. And I'm like, could you give this to him? Like, what the hell was I doing?
How old was he?
I think he was in his early 20s, maybe. Yeah. And I was, 16, which was also. So anyway, I always developed feelings for men in positions of power who were older.
Yeah.
Like professors and anyone, Yeah. And I always think it would be bad if I had a even remotely attractive male therapist. Have you had feelings for female therapists?
I have, but that has gone away. That went away after I started to process that stuff in 2012, 2013. But yeah. In fact, the last time I remember it being really strong was in the middle of processing all that shit. I went to see a woman who was actually just still working on her hours, but she was awesome. She was really compassionate, and she paid me a compliment. And I just remember I felt like I I felt so sexually charged. I felt like I was crawling out of my skin. And so we explored it together.
That's good. That's what I was going to ask. Did you talk about it?
And that's why I shared it with her, because I said, this is not me trying to hit on you. I feel like this is
so good.
Something that is probably valuable for us to explore.
Yeah. Right
now, I feel like I want to tear all my fucking clothes off, and I'm so uncomfortable. And one of the things
what was the compliment she gave you?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
It wasn't like, oh, you look good in that shirt.
Right.
It was like,
Good
you put a lot of effort
Yeah.
into this. You should be really proud of yourself. And we kind of noticed that one of the ways that my mom would gaslight me is she would lavish compliments on me, very kind of possessive and infantilizing. And then she would put the knife in. Like she would say, your mom's cutest, sweetest, et cetera, et cetera. And she would squeeze my face, and then she'd say, but you're rotten to the core.
Oh my God.
And I would just shut down. And so that was kind of the thing that I think we connected to, was it didn't feel safe if somebody was complimenting me, because when is the other shoe gonna drop? And I don't know whether that was true or not, but by the time we got to that feeling had gone.
That's amazing. Oh my God. So your mom said that kind of stuff to you?
Yeah.
So does your mom have mental illness?
I believe she does. I believe she does. Yeah. Yeah. And she had a horrible, horrible, horrible childhood.
Yeah.
And I have compassion for her, but I can't have a relationship with her.
So are you no contact with her?
No contact. It's been that way since, I don't know, maybe 2013. And it's not because of what she did. It's because she won't respect the boundaries I ask her to respect.
Have you talked to her about your feelings about your childhood, stuff like that?
She heard through a friend that I had been talking about it on the podcast. And two reasons that I had never confronted her personally about it. One, I knew that she would deny it and it would just hurt me. And two, I was afraid. I'm afraid. Even today, I'm afraid to fly back to Chicago and have a conversation with her. She's 95 years old and I'm still afraid of her. Afraid of the confrontation.
Yeah.
Afraid of just the thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of embarrassing. I'm a guy that plays hockey, and I get in hockey fights, and
you got a plate in your
check
foot.
Guys, and I'm still afraid of my mom. Not that she's physically going to hurt me, but afraid of the dynamic of a sick person that's unsafe.
I don't think that's a thing. I mean, I understand the feeling, but I don't think you should feel.
But I do have love for her, and I do sometimes question the fact that I've been public about what happened to me, and I feel like a bit of an attention whore for sharing it. But I also know it had helped me grow to claim my story.
And it helps other people too.
And it has.
Yeah.
So many people have written into me and said, my mom used to walk around nude, and she would come in the bathroom while I was showering and, check how my penis was growing, and, and women as well, things happening to them from mothers and fathers. And I never thought that was abuse.
Right.
And if anybody listening, feels like, oh God, some stuff happened, but I don't know if it counts. Read a book called Silently Seduced. And it's about the parent-child relationship and boundaries, and a thing called covert incest, which is they're not touching your genitals, but there is a sexually charged environment that feels really unsafe and as if you don't have autonomy over your own body.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who have experienced the book is called Silently Seduced by Dr. Kenneth Adams. And that book changed my life.
What I was going to say is that in asking, have you tried to talk to her about this stuff? The reason I ask is because I know that there is often the fantasy that if you just, that they could somehow understand what they did and the pain. I don't believe these conversations ever actually work. If anyone listening has had one of these conversations and it's worked, let me know. But I believe generally no, because the person who could have done all that stuff, been that way, is not able to receive unless they've done like a shitload
of work, and they have to have the willingness.
Right.
And, her track record is not a tremendous amount of willingness to follow through on the really deep confrontations of her actions.
Right.
And, one of the things that led to me realizing that I just couldn't have a relationship with her was we were having a disagreement about something, and, people who tend to be narcissistic have a really hard time allowing someone else to have a differing opinion from them, and they will hammer away to try to get you to change your mind, even if you don't need to agree, on something logistically.
It's like it hurts them that someone else doesn't agree with them.
And so I just said, Mom, can we agree to disagree? I don't want to continue this discussion. And she was quiet for about 30 seconds. And then she was like, let's read some spiritual literature together. And I was still fuming.
Yeah.
And I said, Mom, I know you want to be closer to me, but sometimes I don't feel safe around you. And it was like she looked through me like I was a window, and like this glaze came over her eyes, and she didn't ask anything.
Right.
There was no comment about it. And then she started talking about something else. And I thought to myself, there's something wrong with her. And I don't think she's a bad person. I don't know, maybe there's a multiple personality thing, or she dissociates and goes into someplace else. But I can't be around it. And the thought of confronting her about the stuff that happened, I just can't imagine anything good would come out of it. I think I would I would get angry again. And I don't feel angry now because I'm not cornered.
Right.
I'm not cornered.
Right.
And a tip I have for people who feel cornered in relationships with anybody, whether it's a friend who can be kind of draining or whatever, return their phone call on your way to an appointment that is 5 minutes away.
Oh, that's good. I'm notorious for not answering my phone. That being said, 98% of calls I get are spam, but I get a lot of calls from people that I like, and I would answer, but it's like I'm about to record in 15 minutes, or I'm in the middle of getting ready to do this or that or whatever, or like I have been going all day and now I'm just relaxing. But I always think,
I don't think anything's wrong with that. I think that's healthy. Do you call them back though?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But, well, thank you. But yeah, maybe, I don't think this is like pathological or toxic, but at the same time, why am I afraid to answer and say, hey, I'm in the middle of this. Can I call you back?
They're adults. They can handle you not picking the phone up.
That's true.
If it was your child and school was calling and you were like, I have to finish the Housewives of Beverly Hills. I don't know. Is that even still a show?
It is.
That would be different. No, I think you're protecting your battery.
I feel avoidant when I do that.
I would say if you never called them back and never addressed why you're not calling them back, that would be avoidant. Another tip I have for people is if there is somebody in your life who goes on monologues, we'll talk 20 minutes without taking a breath, and it doesn't feel like a conversation. Here's something I've had to say twice to people, and they were from my support groups. I care about you, and this is hard to say, but I figured you would want to know. But I feel like an audience member when we talk on the phone, and I don't want to feel that way. And I find myself getting resentful when I feel like that, and I don't want to feel that way. And I figured you would want to know. And it doesn't mean that I don't care about you, because I do.
How did those conversations, how were they
One
received?
person never called me again, and the other person I still talk to. And he's pretty good about it every once in a while, but not as bad as it used to, because he went 40 minutes without me getting in a word edgewise.
I feel exhausted. Just hearing that.
And I don't tolerate that in my life anymore. It's different if a friend of mine is in crisis.
Yeah.
But.
Well, now part of why I feel exhausted in those situations is because I feel like I need to be actively listening, and I need to, be almost a like surrogate therapist. And do you have that as well? Like, is that?
I used to.
Okay.
I don't feel that one anymore. And I generally will ask that person if they would like feedback.
That's good.
Or not, rather than just giving my opinion. Sometimes I'll just give my opinion, but I try to be aware of that. And I also don't tolerate people who keep complaining about the same thing but aren't doing anything to try to fix it. And so I've had to set boundaries and say, I can't talk about this with you anymore because I just don't have the bandwidth. I love you, but this is not on the table for us.
And how have those conversations gone?
Well, one guy was actively using meth.
Oh.
And I said, for one, I can't talk to you when you're high. Two, I can't listen to you complain about, I didn't even remember what he was complaining about.
Meth quality these days?
Yes. I think it was just bitching about other people, and he wasn't doing anything about his addiction. And they're very related, being in the middle of addiction and being resentful at the world go hand in hand.
Right.
And I said, I'm here if you would like any kind of help, if you want me to pick you up and, go to a meeting, or, you maybe want some insights on what you can do to try to get sober, but I can't listen to you complain about your life when you're not doing anything to change. You're not putting the effort in, and it's just draining me. Oh, and the other thing was he and his brother have this toxic relationship, and it's always the same conversation. And I said, I can't. I'm done with that. I love you. We can talk about something else, but I just get resentful because it's the same story over and over again.
What I really like about your examples of setting boundaries is that they are with the idea of trying to preserve the closeness with the person and preserve the relationship. And like, you're not saying like goodbye forever and hanging up.
Right.
Because I think my exposure to a lot of discussion about, well, aside from my own therapy, is, the discussion of boundaries and the discussion of people pleasing on social media, which oftentimes involves there's one account that I like that is like, we'll spend some time reminding people that someone now I'm like, my brain just turned to silt. So I'm having trouble articulating what it is that she says, but it's like pushing against the idea that if someone doesn't do exactly what you want, you have to go no contact with them.
Right.
Like people are messy, and they're allowed to not do what you want and not be there when you need them and all these things. Because I think there is a big rush to
cancel.
Yeah. Like listen, my boundary is I need this to be exactly how I want it to be. And it's much more nuanced.
Yes. And nuance is so hard. It's so funny because I was just talking to somebody today, and we were talking about, some of the biggest challenges in life is finding a nuanced way to do something that isn't black and white, and that there's an art to it.
And it's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. And a lot of us grew up with a role in a play where we knew the script, and then we realized that play is not serving me anymore, or that role is not serving me anymore. And so you change the script, and everybody else in the play is like, what are you doing?
Right.
Why? What?
Yeah.
You're betraying us. And you're like, no, I'm fucking, I can't do this anymore. But discovering the pardon the the analogy that's going on forever, it is difficult in the beginning to find lines to a new play. How do you have, for instance, here is how fucked of a people pleaser I used to be. What a little boy I used to be. And this was before I got sober. This is probably the late 90s when CDs were still popular. And there were workmen in my house, and they were putting a floor in. And I came around the corner, and this guy was going through my CD collection, putting CDs into his bag.
Whoa.
And I was so embarrassed for him. I pretended I didn't see him, because I was so afraid of confrontation
Yeah.
and embarrassing him in front of his workers. That's how little I cared about myself. And I remember in that moment thinking, you fucking baby.
Yeah.
What is the matter with you? But I didn't have the words
Right.
to stand up for myself because I'd never really stood up for myself. What I would do is I would go get drunk, high, or act out.
Yeah. So you don't have to deal with it. So what ended up happening? Did he just take your CDs and come
He
back?
just took my CDs.
And he came back.
Yeah, he came back and I never said anything.
Jesus.
Yeah. And I was, to this day, I'm like, wow, that's really pathetic. And I had so much anger because I'd never stood up for myself. And there was this moment. This was the moment I knew I needed therapy. I was in my early 20s and I was laying on my horn at an intersection in downtown Chicago, head out the window because people were crossing the street in front of me and the light was green and it was going on forever. And this guy, like out of a time machine from the 50s with a fedora and the briefcase and the trench coat, like out of nowhere, his face is an inch from mine. And with a look of disbelief and pity says, son, get a hold of yourself. And then he just turned and left. And it was like,
he real?
it's like somebody shook me awake.
Yeah.
And that's when I went and started to get therapy.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Sometimes we don't know how angry
Right.
we are.
Right.
You know, well, maybe we'll couch it in a hostile joke or be sarcastic, but you know, that shit's got to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Otherwise it just corrodes our life.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one time I said on a podcast and someone like took umbrage with it, but I said, people are either aggressive or passive aggressive. And now I would change that to like, you're either communicating or it's coming out in some sideways direction, but it's never actually pushed down all the way. It's leaking out somewhere.
Right. And the way it could be coming out is in self-hatred. Some people turn it inwards, and I've heard people say depression is anger turned inwards.
Yeah, I've heard that too. You know, I've heard that anger is an expression of sadness. I think I've heard that. And I think sometime, this is not across the board and it's not like in the DSM it says that. This is a social media thing. But for me, sadness is often an expression of anger because I'm so uncomfortable with anger and I hate the feeling of it and I hate it when it's around me and it just scares me. So if there's something I'm actually angry about, I will often feel sad until I realize what's happening.
That makes sense to me because if you feel like you can't speak up about certain things, yeah, of course you're going to feel sad.
Right. Because you just feel like trapped in a prison of life, man.
For me, the thing that's almost always underneath anger is fear. Is I'm scared. And that's one of the things that's helped me in my support groups is to list the things I'm afraid of. And we do that on the podcast sometimes
Fear
too.
off, right?
Fear off, yeah. We haven't done those in a while. Got to do those again. But getting in touch with those has really helped me with my anger, because when I get angry, then I think, what am I afraid of? It's either I'm afraid something is going to happen, or I recognize something in someone that I don't like about myself and I don't want to admit. And if I just can pause long enough to consider those two things, 99% of the time, the anger, if it doesn't go away, it dissipates.
Yeah.
That to me has been a huge, huge tool.
So Mental Illness Happy Hour.
Yes, ma'am.
12 years.
12 years.
Do you do stand-up still?
Sometimes I do my character, the Richard Martin character, but I quit doing straight stand-up, I don't know, maybe 2012, 2013, something like that.
How come?
Just the traveling and the babysitting drunks at the midnight shows on Fridays. And I just really loved doing the satire of this, super right-wing character. It just is so fun to do. It's just a different form of writing. And it's kind of my picket sign about everything I think is wrong in America. But I haven't been on stage doing him in, I don't know, a couple of months.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you hosted Dinner and a Movie.
I did.
For years and years.
I did 1995 to 2011. Do
you miss it?
I miss the people. The show was really kind of declawed by the end. when we first started off, our screen time was about 8 minutes. You know, it was about 2 minutes a segment, maybe 4 or 5 segments throughout the show.
Mm-hmm.
By the end, we had about 20 seconds to do things. The rest was advertising. And nothing remotely edgy could be done if we were holding a product in that segment. So the advertisers had say over what they wanted to censor or not. So it was just a paycheck by the end, but I loved the people I worked with.
And how did that job come about?
Audition. And I almost didn't go to the callback because I was tired of all the rejection. I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to be a writer. And I was like, just go to the callback, see what happens. But the fact that I didn't give a shit, I think freed me up to be myself. And Annabelle was my first co-host, and she was the one.
Gurwitch?
She was the one in the callback, and I couldn't fucking stand her. And so I just started making fun of her. And I guess that was the thing that the focus group liked.
Right.
And, but when I got the call to do the show and they said, it's with her, I needed the money desperately. And I thought, I don't know if I can work with that woman. And if you're listening, Annabelle, shout out. Love you. We've since mended our ways, but we were not compatible, but that's what they liked. They liked that rub.
Did you know her before the auditions?
No.
So you just disliked her from...
Instantly disliked her. I thought she was pretentious, and I think she thought I was arrogant and naive, which is an interesting combination. Yeah. But I think she was right.
That's so interesting.
I didn't have the tools to have conversations with people, so I would just get passive aggressive, and my sense of humor would get very mean, and I could cut people at the knees, kind of like my mom.
Yeah.
You know, who knew? But
so is that because I've seen some Dinner and Movie, but I haven't seen you. I think I've seen Janet was one of them.
Yep,
right?
I've seen you and
Janet.
She was the third female co-host. It was Annabelle Gurwitch, then Lisa Kuchel. Her last name is Arch now, and then Janet Varney.
So the dynamic between you and Annabelle on air was this contentious? Very
contentious.
Is it on YouTube? I got to go find this.
There's a little bit, but I just got access to a ton. I found these DVDs that they would send us after every shoot. And I don't know, I've probably got them in your handyman's work bag. Yeah. And so they're in the process of being digitized.
Oh, that's cool.
And I've been looking through some of them, and there was some funny shit in there. Yeah, there was some stuff I'm really proud of. But we laughed a lot, and we had a good time. But it was also a lot of pressure. Even though it was this little show on cable, it was improvised. So we wrote it as we shot it, which if you're a narcissist with low self-esteem like I am, you're like, oh, that mistake I made is going to be viewed by 1 million people on Friday, and everybody's going to think I'm a hack.
Yeah.
So then I'm bringing that energy to this set.
Right.
And subjecting other people to that.
Right. Fun. What a fun guy to work with.
Yes.
Do you consider yourself a narcissist?
I think I definitely have narcissistic qualities, and that I think is a quality in all addicts, whether they're treated or untreated. I just think it diminishes. I feel like it's an ember in me, but when I feel threatened, I think it can kind of get bigger.
This has been illuminating and delightful.
I love talking to you. You're so easy to talk to.
Thank you. Do you happen to have a Just Me or Everyone?
Yes.
Sometimes I ponder on something I have thought or done. Is it just me or everyone?
Is it just me or everyone that when you walk into like a little homemade kind of shop that somebody has, where you walk in and you realize, oh, I don't want anything in here, that on your way out, you walk extra slow so they don't think you stole something?
Oh, interesting. I thought you were going to say you still look around to make it look like you might buy something.
I do that as well.
Yeah.
Like this isn't total garbage. Right.
Oh, that's fascinating. I don't do that. I don't do the walking. I don't worry that they think I've stolen something. But I definitely do, like, oh, little wicker knickknacks. Maybe I want one of them. God, I guess I'll come back some other time. You know,
Right.
I definitely pretend that I need to look around. The second you mentioned that kind of store, though, I could hear the chimes on the door.
Oh,
and I
did too.
Yeah,
I did too.
And I already felt like I broke something because they're small. These
Yes.
stores, yeah.
And here's the can I do two?
Please.
When you see an old couple together, you picture them fucking. That's probably just me.
It can't be just you.
Yeah.
It can't be just you.
Well, I do that with any couple.
Yeah.
But to me, it doesn't end
Right.
at any.
Well, I think
at
it
any
doesn't.
age.
I mean,
Yes.
because you hear about like the, STDs going around the nursing home and stuff.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's a
I had
thing.
no idea.
Yeah, it's a
had
thing.
No idea.
Yeah. I don't know when the last time I heard a news story about that was, but like apparently just off the charts. They're
Really?
banging. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. That can't be just you. That's not just you. Okay. Announcement for listeners. I used to take listener Just Me or Everyone's on Twitter. I would say tweet your Just Me or Everyone's to @ARIYNBF. I still do. However, I feel like Twitter, which is now X or whatever, it's just the place has changed. So I am now taking them. If you're on Instagram, follow me on Instagram @AllisonRosen. And there's a highlight on my profile. It says JMOE. Click that. And there's like a little box to submit your Just Me or Everyone there, because people sometimes direct message them to me and then I lose them. So send it there. And then, Paul, do you have a hey, go fuck yourself?
I would say people that have way more money than they need, who still choose to work ridiculous hours and don't spend any quality time with their kids.
Yes.
Hey, go fuck yourself.
Yes.
And tell themselves that they're doing this for their family.
Mm-hmm. Now, how are we defining way more money than they actually need?
10 million a year, where they have enough money that they can send their kids to college. Their cars are running okay. They live in a nice neighborhood. They can go on vacation.
Right.
They have health insurance, can save for their retirement.
Yeah.
And they got 3 homes. That to me is
Right.
when you see somebody.
Oh, yeah.
That's and on top of it, and this is especially CEOs that are actively fucking over people and giving themselves huge pay packages. It's so rampant. But to try to release my anger, we were talking about earlier, I just try to remember they're probably an addict just like me, but their addiction is money or power or
work.
prestige or work.
Yeah.
And their wreckage just happens to be a little larger than mine is, but it doesn't make me a better person than they are. But
that is
still makes me
compassionate.
angry.
That's compassionate. Sometimes I wish I was a workaholic. I wish I was one, because like
you and me both.
I am not, an ambition monster. Like I'm ambitious, but it's really been tempered in many years. Like I am so cool with taking a nap and like doing the bare minimum.
That's awesome. It is.
I guess. Thank you.
Because you have a better chance of being present with your kids.
Yeah.
As long as you're paying your bills, you're not scrambling, you're meeting your obligations and being responsible. We live in a culture, the cult of more. And if you look at, not sorry to be that guy, but if you look at Europe, but honestly, they have like limits on how many hours you can work a week.
Right.
They get 12 weeks a year vacation. I think I had 1 day off, 3 days off maybe this year.
Right.
Or as part of taking a week off and not doing a new episode.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I've never not put out. Have you ever done that?
I did. I used to until this year when finances got tough. I would take off July and December, and I felt fucking great.
And then were you releasing?
Best of.
I see.
Episodes.
Yes.
And
okay,
it felt
that's what
great, but also listenership would drop off when I would do that. So kind of that and the finances, I'm like, I think we're going to go a couple more years without a week off now. So.
Yeah. I've never not released an episode. Because I think what Childish we did, we're just like, we'll be back, on this date. around the holidays. I don't know what the fear is. I guess the fear would be that every single listener is like, well, we're listening to this other podcast now.
Which isn't entirely unrealistic.
It isn't, but I don't think I think it was more realistic way back when.
Right.
Like, I think that, well, I don't know. This is an interesting question. But way back when, it's like you have got to be consistent with your releases.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's important, but I don't know how many listeners listen right when an episode drops. Right. Although actually a fair amount do.
I think as long as you're giving them something every week, even if it's a repeat episode, you just let them know you're still right. You're still there. Because there's podcasts where I don't listen for 3 weeks and then I don't listen for 3 years because
you fall off. Yeah.
It's like going to the gym or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you still do woodworking?
I do, and I'm back into it. And that might be one of the things that I'm going to start doing is selling.
Oh, cool.
Selling some of my furniture. So I'm kind of excited. I'm teaching a friend woodworking, and that was what got me back in the shop because I like being able to socialize when I'm in there.
Nice.
And I love teaching.
Well, Paul Gilmartin, tell
Allison Rosen.
Everyone where they can find you. Plug your things.
The podcast is called the Mental Illness Happy Hour. The website is mentalpod.com, and mentalpod is all the social media handles you can follow us at.
Wonderful. And follow me on social media at Allison Rosen on Twitter and Instagram. I'm the Allison Rosen on TikTok, and I have recently started TikToking a little more. Been bringing you guys into the bathroom when I'm washing my face. I mean, it's compelling content.
That sounds riveting.
You have no idea. I mean, sometimes I take off my makeup with a cleansing balm. Sometimes I use micellar water. You don't know what to expect.
Good Lord, hold on.
Really, I'm like one of those Gen Z people just doing my TikToks. Yes. And then I'm on Patreon. Patreon.com/Allison Rosen. Please go there. Support. Paul, you're also on Patreon.
I am. Patreon /mentalpod.
Great.
Yeah. And could definitely use some donations. I just walked away from a source of income that was half my income. So I'm trying to find ways to make up for that.
Yeah. If you're not subscribed to both of us, rectify that. What are you doing?
Yeah. You're going to be next week's Go Fuck Yourself.
That's right.
Do you want to be that?
You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that. Just me or everyone. I don't want to be next week's Go Fuck Yourself. And then also follow me, subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/Allison Rosen. I think we did it.
So nice to see you again.
So good to see you too.
And if you got anything nutty you want to talk about, let's get you back on my podcast.
I mean, my dad died in July.
I don't give a shit. Was that harsh? I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. So I feel like, now I've got new fodder. Mm-hmm. So let's figure it out.
Okay.
All right.
We'll talk.
Listeners, thank you for listening. I love you. You matter. Goodbye.
Hey, do you know about the Allison Rosen Show? We had a good time, but now we gotta go. Yeah, Allison Rosen is your new best friend.